Okay, it looks like we are live from Domain 17. And Alan Levine's there, and he's herded together Lee and Jesse and Jim, and I don't know who else is going to show up. And we can watch them eat today.
Yay! It's Food TV, Food Network TV.
Excellent. And why don't we do a quick introductions of the virtuals, and we'll start with Alex, then Autumn, then Chris, then Dave Cormier, then Dave Goodrich, and myself.
Sure. This is Alex Chaucer from rainy Saratoga Springs, New York. I'm an instructional technologist at Skidmore College.
Hey, I'm Autumn Keynes, and I am Associate Director of Academic Technology at Capital University in Columbus, Ohio in the States. I'm also a co-director of Virtually Connecting.
Hi, I'm Chris Mosher here in Austin, Texas, and I'm an instructional technologist at St. Ed's University.
Well, my name is Dave Cormier. I am a person of undeclared title at the Department of Education here in Prince Edward Island.
Ranger Dave.
Go ahead, Dave Goodrich. You're muted. I can push buttons.
His camera disappears.
You there, Dave? No. We'll come back to Dave.
Sorry about that. Dave Goodrich, learning designer at Michigan State University.
Hi, Dave. Go Spartans.
Hey, everybody. I'm Ian O'Byrne. I'm from the College of Charleston in the Low Country right now.
Jump on in, George.
Hi, I'm George Station from Cal State Monterey Bay. I see people eating, and I'm very impressed by that because it's 7:30 where I am. I happen to be on vacation in Hawaii right now, and I should be eating, but I was going to be. Oh gosh, and now I want that bagel. Thanks.
It's actually a pretzel bun.
It's a pretzel. Pretzel looks like a bagel. Okay.
And I'm Ken Bauer, computer science professor here in Guadalajara at the Tec de Monterrey. And Chrissy might join us a little late. Dave requested a pony. I don't have a pony, but I do have a ram for you, Dave. Other than that, that's all I have to contribute today.
You know what? I'll forgive you. I'll take that as a stop riding that. No, that's terrible.
It's the pony, Dave. When the penguin says ride, you ride.
So what's going on over there, Lee? How you doing?
It's day 2, man. Like, we got Alan riding a penguin behind me. How are you?
Put that on Google.
Yeah.
We're live on the internet, so it's all good.
Yeah.
So what do you have to tell us from this morning? Day 2.
We're just jumping right into this, right?
Yeah.
Why don't you talk about what you talked about? You just did a talk.
Oh,
and you can do a quick introduction of yourselves as well.
Oh.
Okay. I'm Jim Luke. I'm supposed to be economics professor at Lansing Community College, and I guess that is for part of my job. The other part is I'm also untitled, so I am assuming the title of chief instigator of our Open Learning Lab, which is essentially our domains project at Lansing Community College, and which has been successful enough that I like to say that now Michigan State has copied us and started up their own. You know, I guess Chris Long had something to do with that, but anyway, so that's what I do. So
Lee Skallerup, Bessette, better known perhaps as Ready Writing on Twitter. I'm an instructional technology specialist at the Division of Teaching and Learning Technologies at the University of Mary Washington.
And I'm Jesse Stommel. I am the co-founder of Digital Pedagogy Lab and Hybrid Pedagogy, and the executive director of the Division of Teaching and Learning Technologies at University of Mary Washington.
Holy shit. Do you have an extra long business card?
I actually use an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. You can fit it all.
My full name, my title, yeah.
Oh, and I'm econ prof on the InterTubes.
So, truthfully, what I noticed about this event and the people that we've been working with at this event is how radically different the responses have been to the various different work that I've seen. Work that's really pushing at the edges of what working on the web is and can be. And sort of the stock questions that I'm used to getting are not the stock questions that I've been getting here, and I've really appreciated that. So I gave a presentation with Sean Michael Morris about bell hooks and critical pedagogy and domain of one's own. And my big thesis was that essentially that the radical potential of domain of one's own was removed if teachers were grading domains. And usually when I push on grading, I get a lot of skepticism, a lot of eyebrows raised, and a lot of, well, how could you ever possibly do that? And here, instead, I got people really willing to sit with that idea in a much more critical, thoughtful way. I looked over at him, I'm like, you will follow that.
How's lunch? I did my session just a few minutes ago, and my brain's kind of fried.
It was excellent, by the way.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Yeah, my session, and I was also taking, because I really liked Jesse's session yesterday too. You know, I'm just an economist, as I like to say, but I'm coming up to speed on all this critical pedagogy stuff, and I really like it. Anyway, my session was talking about what we've done at Lansing in terms of domains project. We call it the Open Learning Lab there. We did an experimental project for about 1.5 years. It was billed originally as experimental. I don't think anybody knew what they were getting into. Provost decided, I don't know, in a moment of loss of sanity, gave me half reassigned time, and the IT people gave me some money to sign up with Reclaim and said, go for it. And the challenge was nobody had ever tried a domains project at a community college. And actually what we've learned, I think, is applicable not only to community colleges, but to any small resource-constrained teaching institution. And it's gone very, very well. There was a near-death experience a couple of months ago. So
of the project, not of like
a person.
Of a person.
You say that very lightly. Let me tell you, it felt pretty close.
Okay.
It was fairly stressful. No, I mean, yeah, it was of the project. Yeah, of the project. But we are now, you know, in that liminal, or in that space that I'm sure most of you are familiar with, where the provost has always supported this and is thoroughly behind it again. So, yeah.
Davis.
Is it Davis' question?
I do. I don't know. I would ask a question. So can you talk to me about whether or not the domains project has it, you know, you've got a core group of people there, you've got people you've seen before, you've got people who have broken the boundaries. You know, we're talking about bell hooks and educational technology, which is good business. How are we getting to the point where there are questions that are being asked? I don't mean mature as in we were childish before, somebody was just riding a penguin. I mean mature like the projects are getting mature. So these things, I remember Chris Lehman years ago saying that when blogging starts, everybody's excited, but about year 4, the excitement starts to wear off and the work starts. And I just wonder if you're seeing that same sort of message that Chris Lehman was giving us in 2008 about blogging in the domains community now, where people are like 4 years into their domains project and suddenly everybody's like, okay, well, you're not in the innovative category anymore. You're in the maintenance category now. Like, are you seeing any of that change happening? Is the same thing happening to domains that happened to the work that Chris was doing?
Well, I think what I've noticed is that the people who've been writing about these things for years, myself included, are feeling like we can't just repeat the same things we've been saying for 4 years. And especially at this event, there has been a charge to issue calls to action. And I think Martha Burtis's keynote really set that off as a series of calls to action to essentially say we can't just refine, we can't just continue to tinker. We actually have to take this thing, this ship, if you will, and put it on the water and see if it floats and see what we need to do to get it to float.
And probably the, I mean, UMW is the people out there the most with the 4 years experience. But there's a lot of, this is Alan, a lot of people are just starting out. So yeah. I'm actually impressed with the number of people, although it is that starting phase. Like there's probably a, I mean, we love you, Dave. I'm just impressed with the number of institutions who are taking this on. And so it says that there are more than just a handful of innovating institutions willing to try this. So I think in that case, there's a maturity. And also more on the support tech side, I mean, Tom Woodward, who's a crazy genius.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a one-man show supporting 20,000 blogs at VCU. And some of that wisdom he shared in terms of not just the technical, but he talked about like how he manages it as a human.
Well, and I think that there's something that we have to be very careful of, though, too, even in places where it's been really mature. Just because it's been at some place like UMW for a long time doesn't mean that everybody's doing it. And we see that same tension, or at least I've seen that same tension happen in the digital humanities, where you have the digital humanists who are way far down the road and people who are just discovering it. And the people who are far down the road sort of discounting those people who are just discovering it. It's like, oh, well, we were there this many years ago, catch up. And it's like, well, no, I just found this, right? Like, and you almost have to have empathy for those faculty, for those institutions, for those administrators, regardless of where your program itself is located within the history or timeline or maturity or immaturity, that you will always have the quote-unquote immature people coming to it. And then it becomes, well, how do we get them on board? How do we make sure that they feel welcome within the community? How do we make sure that we are balancing asking these critical next step questions and still being able to bring people on board in a responsible, sustainable, and empowering kind of way?
In answer to your question, Dave, I would put it, my perspective is, as I kept saying in my session, I'm an economist. 10 years ago, I thought the word pedagogy was a bunch of hoo-ha. And now I'm actually writing about this stuff. And one of the things that's impressed me at this conference is it's labeled domains, and there's this heavy thread of most of us are doing or want to do a domains project. But I think actually a huge focus here is it's shifting towards open learning. And I say learning as opposed to, because open education sounds too much like OER. And it also reminds me of the conference in London, the OER 17 conference. I think a major impact that's kept it from just being, I guess, actually pushed towards maturity has been the political events of the past 9 months. I mean, I have heard so much at this conference in sessions where people are actually discussing and talking about what's the right open. What are we doing in open? How do we, like Jesse's session, what does open mean for people in the margin? And, how do we handle all of this stuff? And I'm excited about it. I know, and I'll also throw in, like, from our standpoint as a community college, this actually helps us begin to adopt it more, because everybody's making this shift to the pedagogical and these bigger political aspects, because I can sell that to leadership. They're concerned about that. And that, the fact that it may be an innovative technology stuff, nobody in a position of power understands that anyway. They don't even know how to log into Power, how to write a PowerPoint. So.
Yeah, they're happy for the innovative thing to be there as long as it actually pushes the
Yeah, they want to say we have one.
Yeah, that's fine. Just a quick follow-up around that, and this is another thing that one of the questions I would be following if I was there, which is when I think about, oh my God, is it 10 years ago? 10 years, oh, I'm old.
You're so old, Dave.
Going at this stuff 10 years
about it.
I felt completely unfettered in my approach to telling someone to go open. In the political events of the last 9 months, but I would even say the last 2.5 years, I feel a little bit different about it than I used to. I'm a lot more cautious. I say a lot more buts. There's a lot more context that I provide. My own classes with students, I do an awful lot more work, particularly with women or underprivileged community. Like, although I do a lot more work than I used to. Has there been a track? I mean, you talked about Jesse's talk, but has that been a note too? Do you guys feel that same way in terms of the work you guys are doing?
Yeah. I mean, and I think it was an interesting discussion. So I was at Laura Taub's talk around Bullenberg's work on archiving protests, local protests, and protest history, and particularly around the Women's March and those students who were there who participated in the Women's March. And so talking about radical archives and archiving and filling those silences and being careful of these kinds of things, and how do we empower our students using something like domains to do this? But then the question came up afterwards saying, well, that becomes a very complicated question for somebody who's teaching at a primarily Hispanic institution in Southern California, where a not insignificant percentage of the students are undocumented. You know, what does it mean to be an undocumented student in this particular time where, you know, the act of being open is literally a risk to your bodily safety and your ability to stay in your home and not be deported? So these are big questions that need to be, and then how do we archive that? Like, how can we archive this moment that students rightfully don't want to talk about, but we need to be preserving those stories and preserving those voices, because they will be silenced, and they are being silenced, you know, for very strategic reasons. But nonetheless, how do we preserve that history? So I think those questions are being asked a lot. I know even in my own teaching, I teach digital studies. You know, I approach it very differently than I did 7 years ago. You know, not quite 10, but 7 years ago, when I was like, yeah, we all need to get on Twitter and we all need to be doing this. And, you know, I'm still live tweeting the conference, but I send a much different message to my students to think about what they do out in the open and how they do it, even within the domains, you know, and talking about hiding in plain sight. Right, those kinds of questions, those kinds of issues.
Okay, can I jump in with a follow-up to a follow-up there?
Sure.
Okay. So it kind of goes back to Dave's original question and what the on-site people responded to, and it has to do with not being, you know, like so new. Right, and what do we do about that now? And I'll say we, even though I'm like a couple of years behind you as I, you know, got pulled in, if you will. But I think Lee talked about you know, digital humanists and bringing people on board who were just into it. I know there are people on my campus who run from the word digital still, and they'll do humanities, but they either aren't ready or just like simply won't do anything with the word digital in it, right? And these are young people. These are not like people on the cusp of retirement or anything, right? They're, you know, 30, they're 35. So, and you know, and I'm going, okay, well, I don't get it, but there it is if you want to check it out. And Alan, I think, mentioned it's no longer just a few institutions. I will say in Cal State, I think there's one Cal State, and you can correct me, but it's Cal State Channel Islands, which is Michael Berman, right? And
Yep.
Joe Leafstead and so on, right? And, you know, 22 Cal State campuses aren't looking at this at all, including my own, right? And so, you know, and they're just starting to talk about the concept of open textbooks to save students money, right? That's kind of where the conversation ends on, you know, the largest, you know, public state university system. So all that to say, my question is, how do you keep yourselves or ourselves with these concepts you're bringing in, critical pedagogy, digital humanities, open everything, as you mature, or as we mature, because I'm not maturing yet, I'm too new. I still feel too new. How do we keep ourselves, as we mature, from becoming those nice, staid 20th century educators that we are subverting and rebelling against, as we, you know, get to that stage where maybe we're more mainstream than we were just a few years ago? So that's my real question for the floor.
I have a short little bit, and then I'll pass it off to either of them. But one of the things you brought up, the OER discussion and the free textbooks, and one of the things that I think is that what we can do at events like this and what we can do in these conversations is find better entry points than that. Because there's a way in which, yes, we do need to scaffold people into these conversations. But I think one of the problems is that we're continuing to scaffold them in with free textbooks. I think there are better entry points than that. And to some extent, what we have to do is the entry points that worked for us, which sure, 10 years ago when I was building a course with fully OERs and talking about making textbooks free, that was a useful entry point for me. I don't think that's the useful entry point anymore. And so we have to use these events to find better points of entry.
You had really good advice about that on the
I
pragmatic
did?
side. Yes.
Oh, well, yeah, I guess.
I thought so. I don't know.
Okay. I've tried to, in doing the projects at Lansing, I try to keep a longer term vision. I mean, yeah, I really am behind. I want the domains concept, you know, all the good stuff that Mary Washington folks have done. And people should have an identity and own their own data as much as possible and stuff like that. But from a practical standpoint, Martha called it the pragmatics yesterday. You have to get it to happen. You got to hook into whatever is, it sounds wrong, whatever's hot. Like in our case, our provost, our academic leadership doesn't get it. They're not technically oriented. To be honest with you, they're not even very pedagogically up to date. I mean, you know, the last time they taught was 25 years ago. But I've been pushing open learning. And yes, we've had a free textbooks, but it's helped that was somebody else doing the free textbook stuff. And I'm pushing this open learning. They kind of struggled with it. So I kept hooking on, look, you've got some initiatives that you are really committed to. In our case, there's a general integrated gen ed initiative. There's that they really don't know how to go about. There's an equity and inclusion. And they're deeply committed to this stuff, but they're not really sure how to make it really happen in reality. And so I just went along and started going, you know what, we can do this. You know, you talk about integrated gen ed. Look, I've got it set up. Students are writing awesome stuff in an intro to biology class. They're writing in the biology science class. You know, and we're getting this kind of integrated stuff and then being able to turn around and show them, this is what you're talking about? And they go, yeah, that's what you're talking about. And then that leads into more conversation. The equity inclusion's been very helpful in doing the same kind of stuff. So I'm still holding the goal out there, but
it's probably always going to be uphill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and I think a major turning point for me, and actually what led to was part of when the project turned around, we decided to go with it, was I had a breakfast meeting with the provost, and he said, I'm not really sure I get all of it because he's not very tech oriented, but he wants to have it. But he says, I'm not sure he gets this. And he offered me the analogy of 25 years ago, he taught a Holocaust studies course at a college, community college in California. And he'd done some really interesting stuff, like take the students, I don't know whether it was to the Holocaust Museum or something else, and actually have them work on authentic letters and documents from survivors, stuff that became authentic that actually went into the museum and do all that kind of stuff. Now, unfortunately, you know, when he left, the project died. But he said, it sounds like, is that kind of open? And I'm going, yeah, that's open, authentic learning. I'm just helping do it virtually in more stuff. And that seemed to click for him. And I started to go, you know, it's a whole different thing than writing a term paper for somebody that, you know, you don't even know who the implied audience is. Someone's going to read it once, throw it away.
There's still like an idea of open as exposure and nakedness.
Yeah.
And so and that is something most of us should be concerned about. But it still seems like the assumption is this total exposure of oneself. And
well, and I think that the conversation, like in one of the ways that we're framing it, at least at the University of Mary Washington, or trying to reframe it, is through digital fluency, right? And that's what I'm going to be talking about this afternoon in my workshop, is these modules that we've created about digital fluency, where it's almost like it's not, domain of one's own is a piece of it, and it helps us get to this question of how do we teach our students how to be, I mean, there's a big debate on Twitter, Autumn's a part of it, around is it digital citizenship, is it digital fluency, is it digital literacy? Institutionally, we're calling it digital digital fluency, advanced digital fluency. That's what we're aiming for. But again, I think that's one of the ways and some of the questions that we can use to maybe move away from, say, open. It's not about open textbook. It's about it's about 21st century citizenship, right? It's about 21st century presence. Laura Taub called it even about protest as being a 21st century literacy, digital literacy. So how do we protest? How do we do all of these things that we traditionally did in a quote unquote analog way? How do we continue to do them and continue to do them in ethical, sustainable, safe ways, given the technical realities of the 21st century? And so, yeah, they might all hate, maybe you take the digital away from it because they hate everything digital. But the reality is that, it's almost like, again, I'll go back to the digital humanities analogy, where when did we stop calling it digital humanities and just call it humanities? When do we stop calling it digital citizenship or fluency and just call it 21st century fluency, 21st century citizenship? Because this is a reality. It's not going away, right? And domains is a way that we can get into that.
This idea just kind of, as we were having this conversation, popped in my head. What's been very helpful to me on the campus by trying to push and do some of these domains-oriented and open stuff is it's allowed a lot of conversation that happens on the campus that normally happens, oftentimes with leadership and faculty and at the institutional level, that happens, frankly, in abstract, nice motherhood terms. Now you're presented with actual choices or possible choices, and it really changes the conversation. So for example, everybody talks about academic freedom, but the conversation's all meaningless and it's all general. Like we talk about equity and we talk about wanting students to be scholars and stuff like that. Well, Michigan is an interesting mix. We are western part of the state and we're in the middle, is very heavily conservative Republican.
Show them the hand.
Yeah. This part, DeVos comes from here. Secretary of Ed DeVos comes from here. This part is the largest, most concentrated Arab and Muslim community in the United States. We're right here. And so when, you come up and you start talking about, we have the conversation now, our marketing department and leadership and stuff, now I'm going, okay, so who controls what's on what site? And I start pushing something like, okay, it's openlcc.net. It's a scholarly commons. The scholars who write it control what's on the site. And then they get all nervous about, because leadership, doesn't want to take a political position. It allowed enough specifics for us to grapple with realities in decisions. And then, so that we can go to, okay, this is what we mean for control if it's on .edu, and this is, so that they actually get real, so that instead of just saying, well, students are scholars, they mean students should actually be able to create their own published stuff and then control it. So that's been helpful for me.
I think to some extent, I wrote in my presentation that domain of one's own was partisan. And by partisan, I mean that in the literal sense of the word, not that it's affiliated with a political party, but that it has an ideology. And something that Laura Taub said in her presentation was that teaching is by its nature activism. And I think to some extent, these conversations force us to recognize that no, domain of one's own did not invent teaching as a political act. Domain of one's own did not invent the indie movement in education. That movement was there already, and we need to, in some ways, go back and look at. So yes, Dave definitely did. He invented it, and so we need to go back and look at Dave's early work and mine that for ways forward. And the thing is, at that point, he was working under several pen names like Paulo Freire and Bell Hooks. But the truth is, we can go back much, much further than that. Dewey was writing about some of this. Papert was writing about some of this. Virginia Woolf was writing about some of this. And so there's a way in which I think that we need to look back even as we look forward and use this as a way not to just start a conversation about where we're headed, but also a conversation about what education was to begin with.
I'd throw in another thing. Is I hope we don't lose sight of, because it's one thing for folks like us to come to this conference, or folks like you that want to get into V8 Connecting and talk to us. There's still, 98, 99% of all faculty, if you look across all higher ed, totally untouched by this. And, just the fact that we can go out to people and say, it's possible. I know I'm experiencing, faculty turning around going, all these faculty that have had totally unexamined teaching for ages because they didn't have any options, they didn't have any tools, and now I'm going to them and go, you know what? We can create a website, just buy anything you want. I got a box of Legos. What would you wish you could do? And they're going, and thought about that.
And I think that's important as well, that we take this forward, right? Because the more we talk about it, the more we do it, quote unquote, in the open. And my colleague Chris Schaffer is currently yelling at me, "Which open? Which open do you mean?" Because he trolls me that way across the office. But I think that there are dangers for sure. But we're trying to build a community through where you can sort of pay it forward, right? Yeah. And become a model. I mean, that's how I got started in all of this way back at the beginning. Was just like, I got on Twitter and I saw people were doing it and thought, well, why the hell not me? Yeah. And then, figuring out how is it that I can bring that and share that with other people. And I mean, domains is a part of that. In a large way, and so trying to show, and that's been one of the things that's inspiring, is seeing where everybody has gone with it, right? And see where all the different places that they've gone, where faculty have gone, where students have gone, where general programs have gone, and just seeing like, okay, well, it's small. You're right, 99% aren't doing it, but for those students that we do touch and those faculty that we do touch, I really do believe it creates a kind of ripple effect. Right?
Well, I think we need to keep in mind, we have to keep pushing on that, because, it'd be incredibly sad to be mature at 1%.
Yeah, well, that's... Yeah.
There's a lot more territory to conquer.
Like community colleges.
Yes, like community colleges.
Like community colleges.
Do something.
Yeah, do
hey, it's 1/2 of all the higher ed students.
I know. Well, that's why I'm not being facetious. I mean, I come from, a regional, like you said, high teaching state institution. Where this was a dream. Like, could you I was always told you're not going to get server space, so I set up my own WordPress.com sites and all of that kind of stuff because I wanted my students to do stuff on the open web. Yeah. But like something like domain in one zone, that's oh, sweet naively. No, and I wasn't even that naive that I would think that anything like that would ever happen at one of my former institutions. But we just we push forward with it, and we keep building on the good work that people are doing, and we keep reminding people nicely, kindly, generously that this work exists. And I think that to me that's always the most important. And Jeff Reingold, my colleague, talked about this: is that we have to be patient and we have to be empathetic with those who are coming to us, who are not there yet and may never will. But how do we deal with patience and empathy, but just enough pressure so that we can get there, bring them in, show them this world, introduce it to them, and then get them on board, right? That's a really complex process.
Kindly and gentle are two words that some people on my campus would say weren't applied to how I went about things. But
well, it's also different audiences.
Yes,
right?
Yeah,
different audiences. I'm pretty sure you didn't deal with faculty the same way you did with admins.
No, it's
exactly.
Right, admins are more like the old story, you have to persuade the mule driver or whatever, you have to talk to them very nice, but first you have to hit them over the head and get their attention.
Yeah.
Well, I would also add that I don't necessarily think I don't necessarily think empathy is gentle. I think sitting with someone in their humanness is hard. It's hard work. When people often read my work about kindness and pedagogical kindness, and they think, oh, Jesse's a fluffy, he loves everybody like a little teddy bear. But actually, no, I think that the work is hard. When you really sit with a student and see them for who they are and let them see you, and get them to trust you, but also really trust them. I think that that's some of the hardest work that we do as humans. And so honestly, yeah, I don't think it's gentle, and it shouldn't be gentle.
It's not. It's
I would say it should be kind, but it's not always nice.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes enormous sense.
Yeah.
I love how I can keep saying things and then just turning the camera away from me.
Yeah.
so that I suddenly feel like I'm dropping these mics, and then I go, yeah, hi, see, respond to that.
He must have concluded something brilliant because the camera turned.
Bring on the penguin.
Our reactions, and
It
now
was
we'll just look at each other.
Just bring the penguin on.
And what do you think, Mr. Schwab?
How are you?
I want a domain.
Oh my God, purplepenguins.com. Do we have that? Can we sign that up? Who's made
We need
purplepenguins.com?
that. We need purplepenguins.com.
Yeah.
How you doing? I think Alan's going to take away your computer. I know Lee can talk for like 12 more hours.
You guys can talk.
No, we're actually got pushed to half an hour now because lunch was late, so everything got pushed to half an hour.
Oh, they did push the schedule.
Yeah, they pushed the schedule. So everything's starting a half an hour later.
So yours
we're gonna cut into Jim Broom's dance party.
Yeah. The glee that Tim said that with was amazing.
Yes,
I
it was.
had to tell him that we had to take a half an hour away from his dance party.
Cutting into Jim's dance party is probably for the best.
Yes, it
I
was.
saw him singing punk last night, and it was a full body experience and a full sensory experience for me.
And that was not kind or gentle.
Or empathetic, frankly.
Oh, I felt something.
We're open.
It's feeling things.
He was accompanied by the Moodle Fighters.
No, what were they called?
Yeah,
Moodle Fighters.
The
Moodle
Moodle Fighters.
Fighters? The Moodle Fighters.
The Moodle Men.
Yeah.
No,
the
they-
The Moodle Fighters.
Or the
They were
Moodle
supposed to
Killers?
be the Dead Mook Men,
Dead Mook Men.
but the
they were
Dead
Moodle
Mook Men
Fighters.
couldn't show.
Oh.
And then some other group couldn't show, so they said we were the Moodle Fighters.
The Moodle Fighters?
Gotcha.
Okay.
So any other questions from the group before we mosey away?
We do have time for...
I'll introduce myself. Sorry I'm late. Chris Lukens. Nice to see you all. Join in at the last V-Connecting session. Sorry I couldn't jump in until I did for this one.
Super good to see you.
Yeah, I'm very envious of everyone who's there. I'm very grateful for V-Connecting.
Come next year, they're going to do another one.
Here?
I don't know. I'm voting for here. This is pretty well.
I don't know. After this one, with what Adam Kroon and Oklahoma's done, boy, you'd have to be a gutsy institution to want to step up and host this one. They have set the bar very, very high. Yeah.
I think we should just do a tour of 21Cs because they exist all over. And I know Louisville doesn't actually have a domains project at the University of Louisville, but they were the first 21C, and they're the ones who started the Penguins. Their Penguins are red.
Is there some in
really
Cincinnati? Cincinnati's got one.
So I think Dave's nomination of Charlottetown is a good nomination, but I would go a little further and I would say Dave himself has a really large backyard and a climbing wall in the backyard that he built. So I bet we could fit 80 people in his backyard.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Dave.
I have to tell you though, guys, there's dangerous news out here now though, because if you look into my backyard, there's also a trampoline back there.
It's also, you cut out, Dave.
Dave fell down.
Dave fell down.
Oh yeah.
So there's a trampoline.
Yeah, there's a trampoline out there back there, so
That could be a session. I mean,
yeah,
just throw Jim on the trampoline and we'll just watch him bounce for 30 minutes.
I'm sure nobody would die. I'm sure it would be fine.
Literally off one another.
Scary. Very scary.
No? All right, never mind.
Oh, me.
Yeah.
I think we're bugging out. This has been fantastic, and thanks for putting up with us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
it was
all.
a real pleasure.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
See you this afternoon.
Say goodbye to the penguin.
Thank you, guys.
Oops. We can stay on.
Falling down on the job. We're still
Still
live,
live.
Ken.
We're still live. I thought you were dropping out. We continue. It's the post show. We're gonna smash up you.
It's the after party now.
Sure. Say goodbye and then don't leave.
I know, right? They're like, come on, Ken.
It's always my fault.
No, it's always his fault.
So can we hear from Ian? And I it's personal for me because I don't think I've ever been in a session with Ian.
Mm-hmm.
Why would anybody ever want to hear from me?
I don't know, because I always, you're the only one who answers me on G Plus anymore. Because
you and I are hanging out on Google Plus all the time, and nobody else is there.
A bunch of whatever. So yeah. So Ian, fix all this, will you? Because obviously
you want me to fix all this. I mean, so one of the things I'm wondering about is they talked a little bit about it. And this was something that popped up in the session yesterday. This is something that I had the piece in Hybrid Ped where I was trying to unpack it. We live in right now, and that's why I brought in the historical perspective, but we live in weird times where we got people trolling. We have world leaders that are actively trolling others. We did a little bit of research recently at my institution, and we have a couple students that are developing domains to see what they do and try to make a case to the university. And with that, we presented it at a local conference, on campus. And so I'm talking about domains and digital identity. And then I had a colleague that said, well, why would you have your students go out there when something bad could happen, when they could get trolled, when, they could insert horrible internet meme here? Why would you do that? And so that's one of the things I'm trying to unpack is what do we do in these times? When we're trying to figure out what to do, we're being political, we're being activists, we are, many of us are protesting in various ways. What do we do?
Well, I don't think the answer is that we pretend like the internet isn't there and shut it all down and try to protect them, right? I don't think that's realistic anymore. So, I mean, I try to, it's definitely got to be a balance, right? It's got to be a balance. And I think you've got to figure out how to have the conversation and how to give them access, but do it responsibly and talk about the dangers and talk about what could happen and what you might do if it does happen. So yeah, I don't think, if anything, I think that's maybe an argument for more critical approach to usage, not shutting usage down completely.
Yeah, this is Chris Mosher. I would just plus one that, a number of the students that I teach are already online using social media, and the ways in which, kind of tying into the conversation yesterday with Martha, they're only aware of the networks that they're aware of. So the fact that we can kind of work with them, introduce them to how they can find other networks, the fact that they're going to introduce us, or at least they introduce me to other networks, the only way that we can start to build those bridges across these kind of smaller siloed groups is by having those conversations, just kind of plus one in what Autumn said, that by having these folks have these conversations, engaging with them, and helping them, knowing that there are dangers and trolls and that there are going to be bumps along the way, but then giving them strategies to work with that.
So welcome, Greg.
Welcome, everybody.
As that approach of sort of working with people as you go along and sort of picking up the sort of those lead peoples and those champions seems to work. I've chosen the opposite approach for the work that I'm doing now. And what I'm trying to get done is to try to raise the level of digital literacy of all of the teachers I have, at the same time to prepare them for the potential of doing this later So I'm hoping to create a situation where they can come to understand this. So the thing that I'm selling has nothing to do with domains, has nothing to do with creating an identity in that way, but has more to do with them coming to the understanding that we were just talking about, which is that this is what's already happening. So we are already in those communities. We are already parts of things. I was already sent a picture today by one of my friends whose husband was helping ducks cross the street here in Charlottetown. We're already collaborating in our social spaces. It's just that people haven't come to terms with the fact that that collaboration in their learning spaces is basically the same skill set. And frankly, the same skill set that they would have used 50 years ago or 5,000 years ago. It's just that the technology makes it a little bit easier. And I don't know, I'm not coming to any kind of resolution here, but for me, it's that piece of connecting to their zone of peripheral, whatever, zone of proximal development, find that piece right next to where they're at and sort of trying to create this space so that they can come to that realization on their own. I don't know if that makes any sense or something else people are trying to do, but that's what
Dave, if you could expand a little, because the technology makes it easier, but it also makes it scarier, which is the other thing that I'm seeing locally, in face-to-face, in not just in conversation, but in people even avoiding conversations, if you will, right? And that's not me being an ed tech evangelist or anything, which I sort of tried to stop doing a few years ago. But in terms of digital literacy in the area that you're talking about, it's still kind of a slow trickle of self-selected interest as opposed to maybe across the board faculty interest. I wonder if you could, and I still think it's about fear of technology, but maybe you have some other thoughts on it.
Well, I've recently moved to K-12, so the context is a little different. I'm now working for the Department of Education here in Prince Edward Island. And what I've been able to do, and this is one of those things, and I've had this conversation with a lot of people, a lot of educational technology people end up in policy conversations because people are like, well, the technology affects this policy, and then you get sucked into the room somehow. And this is how I ended up at the Department of Education. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to create a platform for teacher curriculum that leaves their PDFs behind and puts them in basically a Moodle space for all the courses that they have on in the province. And then I'm trying to save them time by using this Moodle learning space to actually learn their way to the curriculum they're going to be teaching the kids, so that a year or 2 years from now, when we go turn around and start actually teaching through this and start realizing that they can start teaching out of that learning management system, which I swore I would never use again 5 years ago, and then get to the point where they see the restrictions of that system and then move themselves outside. So I'm trying to take the realizations I made over 20 years as a teacher and educational technology person and crunch it into 3 for them. So A, the technology is super useful and can save you a lot of time. B, holy smokes, I can use that same save you a lot of time to help get my students to a learning place. Oh, this technology set up this structure is really restrictive. I wonder what would happen if I moved outside of that. Oh, I'm outside in this open space and I can actually create authentic networks to get to learning. So I'm trying to take all of that 20 years of what I've done, and maybe it's just because I'm dumb, it took me that long to realize it, and crunch it down for them. But I think that, and this goes to the conversation they were talking about earlier, I think if we rush to the end, so if somebody just comes to this and we rush to the, ta-da, here's the domains, that it sort of interrupts the natural progression of where we all have to come from. From that first, oh, you mean I'm not supposed to be standing up in front of the classroom telling people what to do, to, wow, we're going to learn as a networked rhizome thing.
And it was like Jarrett said on our session yesterday, that he learned from breaking things as a student using domains. And we learned so much over the last 15, 20 years doing a lot of this, that we learned through breaking things. And they can't step that step.
But that's really scary for teachers. Teachers they're in the position where they feel, many of them, not all of them, but many of them feel like they have to be the expert. And, it's asking them to be vulnerable in front of a room full of people and break things, that can be tough for some teachers.
Mm-hmm. George is going for power outlet.
Yeah, I'm just going to chime in here. I'm fascinated by this idea of the entry points and also of thinking and working in the margins, and then also tying this back to the sort of the conversations around metaphors yesterday. And it's almost like, for me, it's not finding that sort of all-star teacher that's doing everything with technology, but it's finding those people that are further down on the ladder and helping to sit with them and get them up and running. And so in some ways the margins might be not the sort of all-star faculty in the department, but somebody who's a little bit further down, who just needs someone to walk with them, and the idea of all ships rise on a rising tide. If you can start to have success with some of those people that are further down and get them to a place, and I think that's another perspective to take in terms of the fringe. And the question that I didn't get to ask was sort of what metaphors are they seeing sort of rise to the top at the conference that we might be able to use with sort of the there's the top of the triangle, which is people that are sort of very up on technology and social media and everything, but how do we reach the masses, and what are those what are the entry points, and what are the metaphors to use with the wide base of the triangle?
Well, and I mean, you guys know that I'm my big metaphor right now is digital citizenship, right? And I think that domains bring up the idea of digital identity, and so I'm gonna kind of merge that, and I might end up in a different direction. So if somebody else has a better question for Alex, a better answer to Alex's question, jump in there. But I feel like there is something there about personhood, about identity, about creating something for a person. And I haven't done this yet, but I'm considering doing this with some faculty. I'm curious what you all might think of it. Is as an entry point, I've been thinking about, so I've used like domains in my own class. They're pretty good with the learning management system. I've been doing that for a long time, and we have a lot of resources for that, but domains are super innovative. Domains are like crazy idea where I'm at right now. And I've been considering maybe starting with individual faculty creating individual pages and trying to get them to think about just creating a domain for themselves first, not for their class, but for themselves, and seeing how that goes. And then maybe that gets them into a position where they feel a little bit more to bring it into a classroom, or bring it into a program, or bring it into a department.
I also think that when you hop right into domains too, like we're also figuring out our path. We're forgetting our history and pathways. Like nobody started with in cPanel. We all probably started on Blogger or LiveBinder and we're asking people to say, oh yeah, now you're starting with this blank page, this blank template, rather than, and it's not the kind of the natural progression of one's development into, you're finding your GeoCities page. And so that's what I struggle with, is because I'm working with pre-service teachers, and like their very first, it's like their tech fluency class that everybody on campus has to take. And I just haven't started on WordPress.com. So I think going back, I'm like, wait a minute, I started a Blogger. Why would I expect them to just, oh, here's a domains project, launch cPanel and go install something, go nuts. So yeah, I think Autumn's right. We have to kind of scaffold it, I think, a little bit better.
Can people be a metaphor? Bye, Dave.
Good to see you, Dave.
Has anybody worked on like worked with a group of faculty, like a small group, and sort of a cohort model of, you know, sort of getting people together at the beginning of a summer and then having, you know, maybe off of what Autumn was saying, like having them create their own web pages and then kind of leaning on each other for some support as they figure things out, but also having some open sessions. Because one thing I've learned about myself is that I have a hard time learning by myself, but if I'm learning with somebody else, I really enjoy that. And so I've realized that, you know, the classroom works for me because I'm a social learner. I like learning with other people, and I wonder if, you know, faculty would have to be vulnerable with each other and, you know, be able to sort of take some risks and live in their uncomfortable zone. But I do think a cohort model, I think that might be a way to sort of get a group up to speed and so that they can sort of ask questions of each other. I don't know what the metaphor for that is, though.
It looks like we lost Ken. He's been having some problems. So I do that a lot, and I do that with a lot of different kinds of, I guess, content, for lack of a better word. I do that with MOOCs. If there's an interesting MOOC, a bunch of us taking it together. We've done that with BlendKit. We did that with the Future of Higher Education, Kathy Davidson's MOOC. We do that with books. We've done that with free open books. We're doing that with Weapons of Math Destruction right now. But I've never done it with domains. Anybody here ever done anything like that with a domains project or an open project of some kind?
Ian and I tried at the Literacy Research Association to kind of get a study group going. That was to meet, you know, it met at the conference, and we were set up bi-weekly Monday meetings or bi-monthly meetings. I think there were 2 of them. And then by that time, and it turned out to us just doing a lot of tech support, not, you know, talking about pedagogy at all. It was like, oh, well, how do I change my theme color? Or how do I it was a lot of just, I need this WordPress plugin. And so we weren't ever getting to any of the teaching. And I mean, so it's like, you almost need both of those 2 pathways. It just, where they wanted the support was on just the nitty gritty tech stuff, which hopefully we'd eventually have this library of like, well, don't ask me, here's a 2-minute video that you can just go look. But yeah, no, it failed miserably. We'll try again this year.
Yeah, that's the way it works, right? That kind of iterative process. You try, it works. You figure out what didn't work, even if the whole thing worked, right? But I think we've been going for about an hour, and the Virtually Connecting account is having some issues technically. So I think we're going to end the recording. We can continue to talk offline, but I think we're going to end the recording. So thank you, everybody who watched or who's tuning in. Thanks.